and that is going to help your plants achieve beautiful, beautiful growth. They're designed to basically give you very intense growth very, very quickly. That does not mean that the plant is healthy. I know the potential of this plant, and how can I truly bring that potential out? Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name's Claire, and this is Yoli. I make videos all about houseplant care, sharing tips and tricks I've learned over the years to help keep your plants happy and healthy. And today I thought I would do a repot and chat, taking you through some of the houseplant tips I wish I'd known sooner. I made a houseplant hacks video a couple of years ago, and oh my goodness, my opinions have changed so much since then. So I thought it was time for an updated version. But yes, I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. Oh my god, Jodie. So I've got quite a few planty things to be getting through, as always, but I probably won't talk that much in detail about what I'm doing, just so that we can stay on topic. But if anybody's got any questions about anything, then drop me a comment down below and I will try and help. But I've made a list here of some of the things that I wish I'd known sooner. Some of them might be quite obvious to some of you, others might not be at all, but I'm just gonna take you through the list in no particular order. So the first one is building your collection up slowly, and this is something I know it can be very hard to hear when you're first getting into plants. You love plants and you just kind of want to have them all. I learned this the hard way. So before lockdown, I think I probably had maybe, I want to say between 80 and 100 plants, and I loved them so much. But then lockdown came, I decided to open my shop, and that is when things started going, I don't want to say downhill, but I basically just took on more than I could handle. I was getting endless amounts of plants in for my shop stock, and I was falling in love with them, and I was keeping quite a lot back for myself. And I think my collection in the space of a couple of months went up by like 50 plants. And if you've got all the time in the world to be able to look after them and properly dedicate your time to them, then fantastic. Luckily at that point I did. But obviously when lockdown finished and the world started kind of opening back up again, I really, really struggled. And I think the main reason is just because I hadn't really properly allowed myself time to get to know each individual plant. I do have a huge amount of plants in my collection now, but I feel like I have taken the time to really research them, to get to know their needs, just to kind of build a bit of a relationship with them. And I think if you do move too quickly with something like plants, because obviously they can spiral quite quickly if you don't really know them, it can almost just put you off plant care a bit and create the tendency to just think of plants as disposable items, to just go out and replace them when they're not doing well. So yeah, if I was to go back and speak to myself a few years ago, I think I would say find a plant that you love, really take the time to get to know it, really research its needs, and just see how you get on with that one. Give it a few months and don't feel the need to just go in and get them for the sake of getting them. This is something that I mean, I've been guilty of many times over the years with plants, because I did it with Hoyas as well. I think sometimes when you, for me, I fell in love with Hoyas. I got one, I was like, oh my God, these are addictive, and immediately proceeded to get 20 other different types of Hoya, because I was like, I just want to have all of them. And it's not in itself a bad thing, but I think it is just really important to be able to get to know the needs of a plant before shifting your attention to something else. Some of my favorite plants in my collection are ones that I've had for years and years and years. They're not necessarily particularly rare. They might not be plants that other people would look at and go, oh my God, that's a really cool plant. But I've just got a connection to them because I feel like I know them so well, if that makes sense. So yeah, I actually think that that's something that should kind of be addressed a little bit more, because it's so easy to look at other people's collections and compare your own to theirs. I've done it so many times. I would look at people with kind of 700, 800 plant collections, and when I was starting out, I'd be like, oh my God, I want that to be me. I want my house to look like that. I want to have millions and millions and millions of plants. And when I started going too quickly, I was just noticing that there were loads of issues starting to happen in my own collection. I was starting to overlook things. Certain things were getting severely underwatered. I wasn't properly kind of checking for pests and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not saying that you can't have hundreds of plants. I mean, I love having hundreds of plants, but I feel like the ones that I've got now, I've really taken the time to individually appreciate. And although I have always got my eye on plants that I love, I have got a wish list of plants that I would like to get at some point. The rush to do that doesn't feel so immediate now, because I feel like I can offer them the time that they deserve. Essentially, I can really look at them and I can think about how I can get the best out of all of them, because again, I think if you do things too fast, yes, okay, you might be keeping them alive, you might be kind of like doing all the tick box basic things in order to make that plant live, but maybe you're not actually allowing yourself the time and attention to be able to think, okay, well, I know the potential of this plant, and how can I truly bring that potential out? Like, I think a really good example of this for me was the Philodendron melanochrysum. I got that, I think it was during lockdown, and I know they're capable of producing the most incredible, huge foliage. And I think I kind of just wanted that plant at the time as kind of like a little tick box. I thought it was lovely. I got a very small cutting of it, and it never really reached its full potential because I never really allowed myself the space to be able to go, okay, I'm just going to focus on this plant, because by the time it started giving me new growth, I had kind of 10 new ones that I was also trying to juggle. And the next thing that I've written down is finding the right lights for your plants. And although I've put light, I think this just kind of feeds into conditions in general, which again, I know might sound like the most obvious thing in the world, but I can think of so many examples of times that I haven't done this, where I've just chosen aesthetic over a position that a plant might actually be happiest. And also, I think with lighting, and this is something again that I just didn't take into consideration at all at first, I knew that certain plants would do better in lower light conditions and others in higher light, for example, but I didn't actually, I don't think, really take the time to explore this until it kind of happened indirectly. I remember a very clear example with a calathea, which I know is kind of known for being able to survive in lower lighting conditions. And I'd had it in, I think, kind of like bright indirect light. And I was like, well, at the end of the day, I was like, it's not prone to burning there. It's going to be happy. And it did okay. It did all right. But then I moved it to kind of like a medium to low light spot, and it started doing the most incredible things for me. And again, I think that's just me not taking the time to actually research the natural conditions of this plant. It does grow very low to the forest floor, and for that reason, it is going to require slightly lower lighting conditions in order to be able to give you the best possible growth. And I've kind of got several examples of this where I think I just did a very quick Google and just thought, oh, okay, well, so-and-so said that this is the right thing. And I didn't take time to actually try it in my own home, because I think, and this is another point that I've written down, I think experimenting with your plants and really, really monitoring them is something that is so incredibly important, because everybody's home environments are so incredibly different, and certain things are going to work better for you in your home that they might do for others, and vice versa. And although there's lots of sources out there that are going to tell you to just do this to a certain type of plant, and oh, this plant likes this, I think you kind of need to take that advice with a grain of salt, because as I say, nobody is going to have the same experience of a plant if they don't have identical conditions, which none of us ever do. So just allowing yourself, as I say, time to monitor them properly. And that kind of feeds into my first point again, because if you suddenly have loads of plants, you can't properly monitor them all in the way that you should when you're getting to know them and you're introducing them to your home. I think for me, a prime example of this is something like the Monstera dubia. So I picked my Monstera dubia up, I think probably about 6 months ago now, and I did quite a lot of research on this plant before I got it, and a lot of people were saying bright indirect light, which again, I think kind of means different things to different people. For some people that might mean a spot that kind of receives absolutely no natural sunlight, and for other people it might be a couple of hours of sunlight a day. There's not kind of like a set way of defining bright indirect light, I don't think, because everybody has a different opinion of it. But I kept my dubia in my mum's conservatory at the time when I was living there, and it was getting more light than perhaps from the research I'd done it should have been getting. And it honestly, this is what I say about trial and error, it was the best decision I've ever made, because it has grown incredibly for me, and it's giving me the most insanely mature growth now. And if I hadn't put it in that spot, I know obviously it's partly down to the genetics of the plants, but I don't think it would be at the stage it's at now. So I've got a couple of plants actually that I could say that about. And yeah, as I say, it's experimenting, it's getting to know your plants, and it's just kind of figuring things out as you go, which I personally think is part of the fun, it's part of the joy. Like, if I get a plant that's, for example, deemed to be a very difficult plant, a very hard to look after house plants, then in a way that quite excites me. I just think of it as a challenge, and I'm like, okay, well, why do so many people struggle with this plant? What do its natural conditions look like? What can I try and replicate to the best of my ability in my own home? And I've got, like, for example, at the moment, the what's it called? The Pteris albolineata fern, which if you've watched my other videos, then you'll have seen I've done a few updates on recently. That's one that it's a fern that I've kind of struggled with on and off over the years for a very long time. And I really want to figure it out with that plant. I really want to take the time to get to know it and think, okay, I'm not just going to give up. I'm not just going to throw it in the bin and get another plant. I'm really going to do all I possibly can to learn about it and kind of carry that into my future plant care. Again, which if you've got loads and loads and loads of plants and loads of new plants and you're trying to figure it out for all of them, it just becomes very unspecific and you're not able to properly focus. It's kind of like if you were to have, I mean, very bad example, if you were to have loads of children at one point, if you were to suddenly go from having no children to 5 children, then you wouldn't be able to give each of your children the time that it deserved, and you wouldn't be able to properly get to know each child. That's just kind of how I think of it with plant care. And I often get questions from people saying, like, how do you look after so many plants? Like, how do things not go wrong more? And I think because with the majority of my collection, I have built it up over years and years and years, I do really feel like I know each plant. And a lot of the time, just by looking at it or just by feeling its soil, I can tell exactly what it needs. That's obviously not always the case. Things still do go wrong, and they will always go wrong. It's just how it goes. But on the whole, I feel like I know them all very, very well. The next thing that I want to do is pot up this weird looking thing in a bag, which is actually a massive chunk of it's a tuber of my Alocasia portadora. I had 3 of these, I gave one away, and I'm now going to try and get her going as a new plant again because I overwintered her, and I think now is the right time to be doing the pot up, which is quite exciting. But the next thing on my list might sound very obvious, but it's the importance of soil. And I don't think, I mean, for a very long time, I did not realise the importance of soil. Literally, the health of your plants starts in the soil, and without a good quality soil and without using the right kind of soil for your plant is not going to be as healthy as it could be. And I spent so many years just using kind of very cheap, kind of bog standard garden centre soil and stuff like that for my plants. And although it's obviously not the worst thing in the world, the thing that a lot of people just don't know is that that's treated with so many chemicals. A lot of the goodness has essentially been taken out of the soil. The microbes in the soil are destroyed, and that's just not gonna benefit your plants in the long run. And as I say, the health of your plants starts in the soil, and healthy plants are much less likely to have issues of any kind. They're much less likely to be susceptible to pests. They're much less likely to have fungal issues, all of these things. So actually taking time to do a bit of metaphorical digging into the science of your soil, I think, whoa, oh my God. But yes, I think is very, very, very important. And also really thinking about what you're putting into your soil as well. And this is something that I am continuing to learn so much about. It's something that I didn't really pay attention to for a very long time, if I'm completely honest, just because, again, there doesn't seem to be that much talk about it. No one seems to actually be that interested in it. And since I've started really listening and really thinking about things in terms of soil a little bit more, my plants have just been so much healthier. I've had far less issues, and it really hasn't been any more effort than it was before, because good quality soil is full of living organisms, it's full of beneficial microbes, and the stuff that we put on the plants, like if, for example, a prime example of this is pest treatment or hydrogen peroxide or anything like that, which I have spoken about in videos before, and I have at some points believed to be the best possible thing for your plants. the more of that stuff that you put into your soil, okay, yes, you might be killing off pests, you might be killing off certain fungal issues or root problems or anything like that, but also you have to think about the fact that you are also then killing off a lot of the beneficial bacteria in the soil that your plants really need to be able to thrive. And it's so easy for us to just think, okay, well, that's dealt with the problem, the plant seems fine, but as I say, you just don't think about the fact that you are not setting your plant up for health long term, and it's actually doing so much damage. And just because you can't see that damage right away, it doesn't mean that it's not happening. So if you do really want to have the healthiest possible plants and set them up in the best possible way so that they can grow amazingly for you and be as happy and healthy as possible, you do just really need to think about what you're potting them in. So for example, I currently use Soil Ninja's products just because they're not treated with any nasty chemicals. This is not sponsored, by the way, either. I just absolutely love them. Their products are completely organic. The soil is just, I mean, it is just the best possible thing that you can put in your plants. And I'm not saying there aren't loads of other companies like that, because there absolutely are, but just doing a bit of research into what nasty things might be in the soil before you just pop your plants in there is definitely a very good idea. And something as well that people don't think about, I don't think that much, is even things like fertilizers. A lot of shop bought fertilizers are actually, they're designed to basically give you very intense growth very, very quickly, which often happens when the plant is just kind of sent into shock and it goes, oh my God, I'm being forced to grow. That does not mean that the plant is healthy. And I think focusing on health over growth is always the most important thing. And the growth that your plant gives you should be the result of it being in the best possible state and not just being kind of forced to grow. Like, again, none of this video is sponsored. I'm just talking about things that I really like. But I've banged on again before about Liquid Gold Leaf and their products because they are designed with the soil in mind. They don't destroy any of the beneficial microbes. They don't harm the living organisms. They literally just support and encourage all of the good stuff that is already in the soil in order for your plants to give you the healthiest growth possible. And I just think that's so important. And I don't really understand why anybody that really loves their plants would want it to be any other way. And I'm not going to sit here and name and shame brands, but again, just do your own research. Just maybe think twice about some of the stuff that's very easily accessible in garden centres before I mean, just really think about what you're putting into your plant soil, because it is so important and is ultimately going to determine the future of your plants. Because yes, your plant could be getting amazing light, it could be getting all the humidity it needs, it could be in perfect conditions, but if things within the soil aren't right, then your plant is ultimately not going to be as healthy as it could be. So yes, that is definitely something that I wish I'd known sooner and something that I am finding incredibly fascinating learning about at the moment. So I'll continue to talk about that. We can learn about it together. But I think just the first step is just being aware of it and is looking into the importance of soil microbes and importance of using a living soil and not something that's been treated for your houseplants. Obviously as well, and I know that this does probably fall into the research category, but it's just really important to know what kind of plants like what kind of soil mix. For example, some are going to prefer a much chunkier mix with bark mixed in and stuff like that. And others, for example, succulents, are going to need a much kind of grittier, well-draining mix. So as I say, again, research, but that's just going to allow you to maximise the potential of your plants and essentially replicate their natural growing conditions. So, woo! That is what we're trying to do. And also I was going to say, quite often, if I've got a pot with quite big drainage holes, this is just like a weird little tip, but I'll often pop either bark or lacquer at the bottom of the pot, just so that all the soil doesn't fall through every time I water. So I'm just putting some lacquer, which are these little clay balls like that. I'm just popping some of them at the bottom before I pop the plant into it. Another thing, again, that I really didn't know the importance of for a very long time is the importance of moss poles. I think a lot of us probably do think, and I definitely did, that moss poles are just kind of like fancy stakes to hold your plants upright. But if you've got a climbing plant and you just have them on like a standard core pole or those kind of like cheapy moss poles you can buy, they are just so not the best thing for your plant, because what your climbing plants want to do is they want to attach to the moss poles. They want to be able to gather micronutrients from their aerial roots, and that is going to help your plants achieve beautiful, beautiful growth. And often without that, they're just not going to get to that level. So using a good quality moss pole is so important. You can make them yourselves. I personally just make all of mine myself, and keeping them hydrated as well is something that is very important, because I can tell you firsthand from experience, there have been many times where I've let my moss poles completely dry out. And the thing that happens there is the aerial roots that have kind of gone into the moss pole and formed their own little root system will essentially dry out. And a lot of the time those roots will then die off, and it kind of defeats the whole point. So I've spoken again before about how I hydrate my moss poles. I don't know if you can see just there, I've got a moss pole and I put little plastic cups on top of them, make a little hole in it, and anytime the moss pole starts to feel a little bit dry, as I say, I never let it dry out completely, but I'll just fill those cups with water and I'll allow that to hydrate my moss pole and keep the aerial roots happy. And again, this just makes it so much easier if you do come to chop and propagate your plant. Sydney Plant Guide calls it the chop and extend method, and I think that is the best possible way to put it, because your plants will have essentially already formed a root system in the moss pole, meaning that you won't have to chop them and then root them and then pot them up. You will literally be able to just chop that section of the plant and pot it straight into soil, and you will have a brand new plant. So don't think about things in the same way that I did. Don't think of them as just fancy stakes for your plants to keep them upright. Really look at the benefits of them and really think about what they can do for your plants if you use them in the right way. Because as I say, a lot of the time, and a lot of my plants, for example, my Philodendron Splendid, which I'll put a clip in of, I think because that one is so well rooted into the moss pole, although I've only had that plant for a very short time and it wasn't particularly mature when I got it, the growth it's given me has just been out of this world, because it's been able to absorb all of the micronutrients and form an amazing root system within the pole. And yeah, it's been fantastic, and it's definitely something that I wish I knew more about sooner. And I've already kind of spoken about the importance of just like playing and experimenting with your plants. This is something that I just continue to do. Like, I'm always trying out new things. I'm always doing little at-home experiments to see what will work better. And like every single time I do that, I will almost always learn something new. Like, for example, I recently potted up my Anthurium clarinervium seeds, and I thought I would just try the germination in a dark place, the seed germination, to see if it did anything differently. A lot of you were saying that that just wouldn't work and to just keep them in the light. But I've got to say, the ones that I've had in the dark, I think it's been just over a week since I did it, and they are doing amazingly. Those ones are already rooting, and the ones that I had in light are not rooting yet. So again, it's something that I never would have thought to try if I hadn't just kind of gone, you know what, let's just give this a go. And you discover amazing things. Like, there's been certain aspects within propagation as well. Like, I know propagation boxes are something that people use a lot, and it's kind of the same principle with a cabinet environment as well, because amazing humidity, good light, all the stuff your plants need to kind of kickstart and get going. But I know, and this is just again another little experimenting thing, but I know people always say that you need fans in a cabinet, so there needs to be good airflow, because otherwise they're going to go mouldy and stuff like that. There is a lot of truth in that, and if I didn't run my fans in this big cabinet, because I've got lots of plants in soil in there and lots of natural humidity being produced, if I didn't have good airflow, then yes, I probably would encounter mould. If you think about a prop box doesn't have any circulation or air ventilation, and plants still do grow really well in there. So my little cabinet in my bedroom that I use purely for propagation now, I've actually stopped running the fans in there, and I haven't had any issues with mold. I do just open the door every now and then to kind of let some airflow in, but that is something that a lot of people would tell you not to do. And I'm just like, but it's working really well for me, so why would I not try it? And I think there's often just a temptation to almost kind of take plant care a little bit too seriously. And I know we can all be guilty of this sometimes, when maybe there isn't the time to play an experiment and you do just need to get on top of things, but it's supposed to be fun, it's supposed to be exciting, you're supposed to be learning things as you go. And yes, you can do all the research in the world, but things are still going to go wrong, because that's how we learn, through trial and error. And also things go wrong in the wild, in nature, in their natural environments. I think it's important to remember that a lot of the time, the plants that we've got in our homes, we really want them to be perfect, and we really just want to do everything we can to have these like flawless plants. But actually, a lot of the time they're going to be looking much better than they would be in nature, because we have kind of like ultimate control. So I think just sometimes relinquishing a little bit of that control and allowing them to just do their thing, and not faffing over them too much, not pouring nasty things into their soil, all that sort of stuff is very, very, very important. And there have been times that I've tried things that haven't worked, a lot of times where I've tried things that haven't worked, and plants have started to go downhill. And Sometimes, yes, that's meant that I have to kind of chop and propagate them or try to save them. But at the same time, as I say, you don't really, if everything's just going right all the time, you don't really learn much from that. And I quite enjoy a challenge, and I obviously don't enjoy it when things are going wrong, but it just sometimes helps to make the reward of when things start to go right even greater. And I'm definitely not a plant expert, but any advice I give will always be from firsthand my own experience. Like if someone's going, oh my god, this is going wrong with my plant, I'll be like, oh well, you know what, that happened to me too. And it just really sets you up to be able to kind of, I don't know. I mean, the plant community is so lovely. Just kind of help each other out, discuss things in a way that if everything is always meticulous in your collection and nothing ever goes wrong, then you kind of don't have the knowledge about. Does that make sense? I don't know. Like, it makes me quite excited to be able to share things that might not have been going very well for me, and then I managed to fix them. The next thing I've written down is the importance of pest checking your plants. And as I say, I have got a video coming in the next couple of days on biological pest control and doing things a lot more naturally, because I have previously just spoken about the kind of chemical ways of doing things, and my opinion has massively changed on that. But I won't go too much into detail about that now because I want to save it for that video. So that will be up soon. But pest checking your plants is obviously incredibly important. I think a lot of people often kind of freak out about pests a little bit too much because they are living things. They are going to come with creepy crawlies sometimes. There are going to be things living in the soil. It's kind of like bringing a dog into your home and expecting it to never get fleas. Like, it is just going to happen from time to time. And I sometimes get messages from people being like, I've never had pests, is there something wrong? Of course there's not. That's amazing if you've never had pests. But I also think it is just totally normal to talk about the fact that from time to time, pretty much all of us that have got a lot of plants are going to get pests, because they come in on your clothes, they come in through the windows, they come in the soil. And having one or two pests, like I've got plants with pests right now, having a few here and there in itself isn't actually that much of an issue. It's when they become an infestation, that's when things can go downhill very, very quickly, because they can, oh my god, they can reproduce at the speed of light. So pest checking your plants is a very, very important thing to do. I try to do it as much as I can, but I mean, I don't have a regular kind of set schedule. When I water my plants, I'll usually also just go around with, I've got these microfiber gloves here, and I'll do some dusting. I'll really inspect both sides of the leaves, have a look at the stems, have a really good look at the soil as well, and just see if I can see anything nasty lurking. And because I do, on the whole, try to stay pretty on top of that, in general, I mean, I haven't had an infestation in a very long time, and in the times that I have, when pests have got very bad, it's usually been in quite a contained space that's just been ignored. Again, this is another reason why to only take on as many plants as you think you can handle, because sometimes there will come a point where maybe you're like, oh my god, 5 of my plants have got pests and I need to treat them all immediately. Or you'll go away for a week and you'll come back and loads of them have got pests. It can be such a pain in the ass, it really can, but it is totally normal. It is fine. It's just the way that you go about dealing with it that is the thing that I think my opinion's changed the most on. And as I say, I'm using biological pest control, things like predatory mites, nematodes for fungus gnats, all that sort of stuff. I'm using them all of the time now, literally all the time. And my plant care has just become so much easier. The issues just kind of on the whole take care of themselves, and it just creates a really lovely symbiotic relationship within your home that replicates how it would be in nature a lot more. It comes back to what you're putting onto your plants and into your plant's soil, and for me, this is, in my opinion, the best possible way of doing things. But as I say, I will speak more about that in detail when that video is up. That does not look like the prettiest thing in the world, but I am hoping that it should start to give me some lovely new growth soon. I have actually got another one here as well, but I think it's looking a little bit dehydrated. I might pop that back in moss for a short time, so I'm gonna leave that for now. And I realise I'm kind of going in a little bit of a jumbled order with all of this. I'm just kind of talking in the way that I've written things down, but I've written down watering, and whoa, again, that is something that I know is really quite obvious, and people kind of go, oh yeah, well, of course you need to find the right balance of watering for your plants. But watering is often the place where most of the issues stem from. A lot of people that are having issues with their plants for whatever reason or the other is most commonly triggered by a watering imbalance, and that is people essentially guessing what their plants need and not actually monitoring their plants and figuring it out within their own home environment. And one thing that I've always said, and this has not changed since I started YouTube, is that underwatering is better than overwatering. And I still 100%, also I don't know if this is even ready to be potted, I'm just trying to have a look at the roots. That is something that I 100% still stand by. I regularly underwater my plants, which I know might not sound like a good thing. I mean, I don't always mean to, but sometimes if it's like a crazy week or something, some will go way too long with dry soil. But the thing that you've got to remember as well is that in nature, a lot of the time, your plants are going to go for weeks on end without water sometimes. There are drought seasons, and they are actually incredibly resilient, most of them. I know there's some like Calatheas, for example, that can be incredibly dramatic, but on the whole they are more than capable of bouncing back from conditions that have been a little bit dry. And I know you could kind of spin that and say, well yes, but at the same time it might rain for 5 days on end, and how do the plants not get overwatered? That is a fair point, but at the same time, you've got to think most of the plants that we have as houseplants are potted plants. They've got a contained amount of soil around their root system that their root system can't branch out in the same way that it would in their natural habitat. And if you're pouring water onto just kind of like, I was going to say wild ground, onto an area of ground that goes down a very long way, then water isn't going to build up around the roots in the same way as it is if you're constantly watering your potted plants, if that makes sense. So yeah, as I say, under for me is always better than over. It is so much easier on the whole to revive a plant that's been severely underwatered than one that has been severely overwatered, because overwatering will lead to things like root rot, fungal issues, stem rot, and often mean that you have to completely chop up your plant. And sometimes it also means that your plant isn't savable. So yes, I have actually just put that plant back into moss in its container because I looked at the root system and it is so spindly and fragile. I'm just a little bit nervous of taking it out and putting it into soil at the moment. The plant seems fairly happy, so I'm just gonna leave it in that propagation stage and check back on it again in maybe a month or so and see how it goes. Because again, another tip, I mean, not really a tip, but sometimes if you do pot up a propagation too soon and the root system isn't well established enough to hack the moisture that's coming from the soil, it can lead to, again, issues like root rot and stuff like that. And if you're in any doubt, I would always extend the propagation period a little bit more. Like sometimes I'll have plants that I'm like, I could have potted that up 2 months ago, but instead I just leave it propping so that I'm really sure about its root system. And there are some points that I was going to include in this video that are more just kind of like, I don't know, like quick fix tips. Like for example, I've talked about bubble wrapping your windows before and stuff like that. I did make a video, I think probably about a year ago, that kind of just went through like practical things like that. So I'll link that video down below. But I guess the last thing, and this isn't so much like a plant tip, but something that I guess I wish I'd known sooner, is just, and this is going to be so cheesy, but just how wonderful the plant community really is. Like, I have not always felt in life like I've fit in everywhere. I have been in many situations in my life where I've just really kind of struggled to not even find common ground, but just form connections with people. And oh my goodness, the plant community is a community that I wish I had discovered so much sooner. Like on the whole, everybody is just so kind, so inclusive, just so willing to help each other out and really push each other to see each other succeed. And I think that is the most wonderful thing in the world. I have made some fantastic friends through planty stuff, and I know a lot of the time people say like, oh, I wish I had a planty friend and stuff like that. I mean, for example, like primary example, my friend Emma, who is Good Growing on YouTube, she is one of my best friends, and we just met because I dropped her a message on Instagram one day and I just said, I really love your videos. And then we just started talking and now we've become really good friends. But there's so many Facebook groups out there. Obviously social media is brilliant for this, just sharing photos of your plants and talking about them with people. It's just wonderful. It's so supportive. People within it are so generous. Like a lot of the plants that I've got in my collection now have come from swaps from even some of you guys. And it's something that I'm just very grateful for. And I think if I'd known, I mean, back in the day where I really liked plants, but maybe I wasn't posting about them all the time on social media, if I'd known that there was such a lovely community of people out there, I think maybe I would have started trying to find my people a little bit sooner. I don't know, but my whole time even just doing YouTube over these last couple of years and stuff like that, like I've just got to know some wonderful people, and you guys are just the most supportive audience, because I watch quite a lot of YouTube myself, not all planty YouTube. I've got creators that I love that are so far away from planty stuff, and some of them often speak about like really horrible like hate comments they get and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, like it happens from time to time. It's gonna happen when you put yourself out there, but on the whole, I'm just like, oh my goodness, you lot are just so lovely, and I feel so encouraged and supported by you. So yeah. I don't know where that last little bit came from. As I say, not a houseplant tip, but just something that I wish I'd known a bit sooner. But yeah, with this one, this is my begonia Thurstonii. I was going to pot it up, and it has got a really good root system, but the moss is a little bit dry, and I think I really need to hydrate it before I go ahead and pot it up. So I'm going to leave it for the time being. But yeah, the other plant tips video that I did, not the original one, oh dear God, let's just scrap that one and pretend it never happened. But the one I did last year, I think I pretty much agree with most of the things that I said in that still. So I'll link that video down below if you haven't seen it and you're just looking for some kind of like quick things that you can do, because I know this was more of just kind of like a chatty video. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I really hope you found it useful. If you've got any houseplant tips, things you wish you knew sooner that you would like to share, then please do comment them down below. I find them very interesting to read, and I know it's useful for all of us to be able to kind of go back and look at that and learn things together. But yeah, I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video.